Welcome to the webinar today. We see like a lot of people are starting to come in. We're going to get started here in just a minute. So come on in and we will get started soon. As you come on in, if you want to introduce yourself briefly, go ahead and open up the chat. Tell us your name and where you're from, which university or college you might be from. We'd love to get to know you a little bit better. All right, we see a lot more people coming in. This is great. Thank you for all of those who've introduced yourself already in the chat. We want to keep this really conversational today, so we hope that you will utilize that chat as we go throughout to share your ideas and your questions and everything else. So it's great to see all of you here today. Thank you again for taking some time to be with us this morning. Or good afternoon. So some of you, it's afternoon where you're at. It's morning here in Salt Lake City where I am. I know we're kind of spread out a little bit. Looks like we're about on time. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to briefly just introduce myself. My name's Garrett Jestice. I lead the marketing team for Lucid Press. And first and foremost, we want to thank you for taking some time to spend with us today. You know, we hope that you and your families and your loved ones are safe and healthy at this kind of crazy time that we've had the last few months. Lucid Press, for those of you, I see a lot of our customers on right now, so that's great. It's great to see all of you. We're going to hear from two of them shortly, but just for those of you who don't know, Lucid Press is a brand templating platform. So really it allows you to set up a library of lockable templates so even non-designers can customize content and ensure consistency. And so we work with a lot of different industries, but especially in higher education. So lots of higher education universities, colleges use Lucid Press to maintain brand consistency and allow others across campus to create materials. But you know what, our goal today as we jump into this, I'm going to introduce you to our panelists that we have here in just a minute. Our goal today is really to serve and not sell. We really just want to start a discussion about some of the challenges that higher education is facing right now, especially with regards to marketing and communications, and maybe some potential solutions. So again, chime in and use the chat as we go throughout this today. We want to get to know you and have you be part of this discussion. So now with further ado, I want to turn it over and introduce our panelists that we have today. So first we have Kate Ledger. She's the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Marketing and at the University of Pittsburgh. Kate, how are you doing this morning?
Looks like real like Zoom stuff.
Yeah.
Good morning. I'm well, thanks.
Thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it. And then our second panelist that we have today also is Justin Bannister. He's the Associate Vice President for Marketing and Communications at New Mexico State University. Justin, how are you?
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to participate today.
Well, thank you for being here. I know we've had, for those of you who registered for this webinar a few weeks ago, it's changed a little bit. Our titles changed and we even had an audible. So Justin filled in for someone on his team who couldn't make it, just recently yesterday. So we're super happy to have you both here. Justin, really appreciate you filling in last minute for us. And again, hope to have a really good discussion today. So, I mean, before we jump in, I want to make sure that our audience gets to know each of you a little bit more. So as we go through, Kate, I'm wondering if you could start and just tell us a little bit more about some of your career background highlights, a little bit more about your university. So, how big is it? How many students? And a little bit more about your marketing and communication team.
Sure. So I have been at the university for about 15 years in a number of different roles. I currently serve in our Central Office of University Communications and Marketing. On campus, we have 28,000 students at the Pittsburgh campus. About 18,000 of those are undergraduates. Our central team has 60 folks that combines both news as well as marketing. Marketing includes web and social, as well as our design team, our project managers, and all of the above. So I would say that we are, working towards being integrated. We launched a brand last year, and that is where our relationship with Lucid Press really started in getting that brand spread across our campus. So that's where we're at today.
Excellent. Thank you. Justin, same for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about you and your university?
Sure, thanks very much. So my name is Justin Bannister. I'm the Associate Vice President for Marketing and Communications at New Mexico State University. I started out as a TV reporter after college, and I spent about 3 or 4 years as a TV reporter. And then I tell folks that I accidentally got hired back at New Mexico State University. I was a student there, wasn't looking for a job there, but they approached me and asked if I could maybe help them out, and I said yes. And then I've been here ever since, almost 13 or 14 years now. I'm the Associate Vice President, so I get to oversee a few different divisions. We have a marketing unit that does a tremendous stuff, and they are the ones who predominantly use the Lucid Press with some other folks around campus. We also have a media relations team. I probably, especially over the last few weeks, that's the area that's commanded the most attention from me and a lot of other folks. And then we also, part of our unit is also our university broadcasting. So we've got a PBS and an NPR affiliate on campus that report up through us as well. About 16,500-ish students at our Las Cruces campus. We're the land-grant university for New Mexico. So we have research, we have extension, in addition to our education efforts here at NMSU.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much for being with us again. And for all of you who are listening, I know we've had a lot of people chime in the chat, but we want to get to know you as well. So feel free to introduce yourself and tell where you're from. And just to start us off, I want to do a poll real quick. And so the first poll that we have, you can see that up right now, is how big is your college or university? You know, we kind of have it bucketed into small, medium, or large here. So we see a lot of these answers coming in right now. We'll leave it open for just another few seconds so we can get to know each other a little bit more. And again, if you haven't, please introduce yourself in the chat. We want to keep this really conversational today. And so we want to make sure that we can hear your thoughts and ideas, even if it's just through chat. So it looks like we've had a lot of people come in and respond to this poll. So let's show you the results of this poll. It looks like we're pretty spread out. That's good. We have, about 21% from smaller colleges or universities, about 20% medium, and about 59% large, over 15,000 students. So it's great to have you all with us today. And we want to just jump right into the questions then. So first question, we're just going to jump into the thick of it. I've been reading a lot of research, especially the last week or so, on the impacts of COVID-19 on higher education. And there's some good research out there. Some of it we'll share with you. I know there's one report that was put together by Inside Higher Ed where it looked at the survey. It's a survey of college and university presidents about what are some of the biggest challenges to COVID-19. And it was kind of across the board. But in a similar vein, Kate and Justin, I want to know from both of you. Kate, we'll start with you. What's the largest challenge that your team, specifically marketing and communication, has faced currently in the last few weeks?
So it's hard to pick one. There have been so many challenges for us. And I work on the marketing side of our team, but we are certainly integrated and work closely with comms. I know that the comms team has been, just really inundated with the news, with communicating messages out to our campuses. What are the best ways to do that? How do we do that and make sure they see the most important information? So I think really communications across our team and across our university, we've started to host since March 11th, which is the day that the University of Pittsburgh announced online coursework. We have hosted a daily call where everyone on our team, as well as the folks across campus who work in a communications or marketing role, jump on the phone and talk about what is the news of the day, what do we need to be focused on. And it's a really great way for us to make sure we're staying connected on what the international population might need versus what the incoming students need to hear, right? So what are all the messages out there and how do we keep everyone aligned on where we're at? So I think just keeping that communication line open has been a challenge, but we've tackled that using the phone.
Yeah, good. Well, I mean, I know communication is key. Internal communication right now, external communication, making sure that's consistent. We're going to get into that a little bit more later today, but I think that you're not alone. I mean, not even just in higher education. That's a challenge I think that a lot of organizations are facing right now. Justin, what about you? What would you say the biggest challenges that you're facing right now?
I think the biggest challenges for us are probably going to be a lot of the same things for everybody who's on the line here today. Probably the one that we had the least impact on is the budget for higher education. There's a lot of economic factors that weigh into everything that's happened over the last month. But the ones that we probably have the most impact on, I kind of put these into a bucket of psychological things. People need information, and if they don't get the information that they're seeking, they start to worry. They start to become anxious. There's a lot of things that happen there. So we need to make sure that we're communicating as often as possible, but still effectively, so we're not bombarding folks with 87 emails and they don't know where that one email was with that one piece of information about how they can access whatever the case may be. So it's making sure we're efficient with those communications and just talking to all of our stakeholders, whether they're employees or students or community members or lawmakers or alumni or donors or just any one of these individual stakeholders. It's keeping that communication going.
Yeah, I mean, I think higher education is especially unique, and a special challenge that higher education has that a lot of other organizations don't is you have so many of these stakeholders, right? And so keeping that communication consistent and knowing what to say and when, I think, is key. And again, we want to talk a little bit more about that. But again, we want to do another poll. So we want to hear from those of you who are listening about, you know, what are some of the largest challenges that your marketing or communication team is facing. So we have a couple up here. A couple examples of things. You can see that pull up right now. Is it, you know, is the largest challenge really knowing what to say and when, or keeping up with the volume of materials or requests that are coming in? Is it ensuring communication is consistent and accurate? Is it, adapting to remote work, which is new for many of us, or maybe something else? If your biggest challenge isn't there, we'd love to hear what that is. Share that in our chat. So it looks like we've had a lot of people respond to this already, and I want to show you the results of what we're seeing. What are the challenges that we're all facing right now? So if you take a look at this, it looks like it's pretty evenly split. When it comes to a lot of these, there are challenges kind of across the board. Probably the biggest is keeping up with the volume of materials and things that need to be created and go out there. So, Kate, Justin, what do you make of these results? Anything stand out to you in this? Kate, we'll start with you.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. I think we are all in the same boat, which is really reflective of the whole pandemic, right? We're all experiencing a lot of the same things. I see some of the things that people said in the chat are particularly true. I noticed Janice mentioned, they started a reorg. We were looking at how we're organized and that's just gone away, and the budget cuts are affecting that, right? So I think part of the challenge that combines all of those things is we're having to get all of these messages out, strike the right tone. Someone mentioned that, right? But also there's just regular work that was happening before we left. And how do we keep that going in the background to keep up with those things and yet also focus on how things are very different?
Yeah, that's great. Justin, anything stand out to you from those survey results?
Yeah, a few things, and I wrote down a few notes. I think the remote work is something that, at least from our case, it's something we've adapted to quicker than I probably would have anticipated. And that actually, I think, is going to be something that's going to stick with us much longer than this pandemic will. Even when things go back to normal, I think a lot of this remote work stuff is going to stick with us, and there'll be more flexibility with a lot of folks in their business offices. And to that effect, I saw one of the areas that maybe I didn't anticipate seeing on your poll was the volume of work keeping up with the materials. And that's actually something that we saw the first week or So when everybody was working from home, they noticed, hey, I've got some extra time now. Why don't I get to that one project that I've been putting off and putting off? So yeah, our graphic designers and other folks in our marketing team really did see a big uptick, and even our web folks had seen a big uptick in people reaching out and saying, hey, I'm ready to work on that, whatever the project was that they've been holding off on. And then the area that I gravitated most towards was kind of the messaging and making sure we're saying the right things and being consistent in that messaging. I think that's the most important thing during all of this, and really the recipe for success is being able to strike that right tone and keep it consistent.
Yeah, excellent. I think you're absolutely right. I think, a lot of those themes, like I mentioned before, Lucid Press, we don't just serve higher education. We work with companies and organizations across all different industries, but there's a lot of commonalities, as we've talked with, people in other industries as well. The work from home things that you mentioned, I think that is going to be something that might stick around a little bit longer with lots of other organizations. It's good to hear that, your university, your team has adapted pretty well to that. I know that, some have struggled with that, and I know that that's been a challenge, but it looks like, a lot of those same themes that you both mentioned at the beginning are consistent across, everyone who's on this webinar today. So with that, I mean, what are your teams thinking about? How are you trying to solve some of those biggest challenges? I know that's a big, huge, loaded question, and we'll get into some of the specifics later, but what things have worked as you think about some of those largest challenges? What things have you tried? And what are other ideas that you maybe want to try? Kate, we'll start with you.
Well, one of the things that we are now trying to do now that we have settled into somewhat of a rhythm is really bring the brand messaging back to the forefront of what's happening. So things were happening so quickly, and it's not that the brand messaging got lost, but it needed a refresh and a reminder. And our brand, the central theme at the University of Pittsburgh is the idea of reinvention. And it's rooted in truth. It's based in a lot of research that we did with Carnegie Dartlet and Ology. And now it is true more than ever because we have all reinvented the way that we work and the way that we educate and the way that we need to do research and those sorts of things. So we are working now on how do we bring that back out and remind folks of that messaging, and in a way that makes sense and aligns with what continues to come out from the University of Pittsburgh. So that's been one of the larger projects that we've been working on. And then we have spent a ton of time pivoting to virtual events. So this is really helping people get in a place where they're comfortable hosting events, they know how to promote them. We built a website called Pitwire Live that promotes the events that we are hosting across campuses and across our populations. And that has been very successful, but a shift for us. And then we have our virtual celebration on Sunday for our graduates for the class of 2020. And that has been a big project for marketing and a big pivot for us. But I'm really proud of the way the team has come together on that.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the things that stood out to me that you said is, just kind of getting back to the core of that messaging, especially brand messaging of, why do we exist? What's our mission? What's our purpose? And how do we key into that? And I guess kind of simplify. I like that idea. That's something that, I've been thinking a lot about across our marketing team is how do we simplify? I think that's what might be one of the positive benefits that come out of this pandemic that I hope continues. There's so many channels and so many ways to communicate. And, when you get into a crisis kind of situation like this, sometimes you're kind of forced to simplify and focus on the things that are most important. And I hope personally that some of that, exists afterwards. And then, the virtual events, I think many of us are in that same boat. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this right now. We had a lot of events, canceled that we were going to and putting on as well. And I know that's a big thing that people are trying to do right now. So I think that that's probably shared across the group. Justin, what about you? What's your team thinking about?
Sure. So we really do think that there's a lot of benefit in talking to folks across multiple channels. We've been doing that with our marketing efforts for years now, across lots of different platforms. We don't just buy digital, we don't just buy traditional. We make sure they're integrated there, and we've really carried that across with communicating to our stakeholders during this time and making sure that we're not just putting together news releases and we're not just putting out emails to our stakeholders, but we're also doing virtual town halls on a weekly basis. We're doing video conversations on a weekly basis, social media posts, and we're making sure that all of those kinds of communications still look very similar. The tone is the same, but we really do think that it's an opportunity for us to reach as many people as possible while still staying consistent with that messaging and making sure all those things still have the same look and feel across all of those different platforms.
That's great. I love that. I want to dive into that. Actually, it's a good segue. I want to dive into a little bit deeper on the communication front. So, the next question I have for both of you, and Justin, I think we'll start with you again for this one.
Sure.
But I know you both have mentioned all of the different groups across campus. It might include current students, prospective students, faculty and staff, donors, the public, all of them. Who's most important, if there is one, and who have you been communicating with the most, and what have been the channels or mediums for communicating with these stakeholders that have worked? Is it just email? We've mentioned email. Are there other things? Are there flyers and posters that need to be put up for facilities on campus? Are you using an internal messaging platform? Is it text? Is it, so who are those main groups, and what's the channel or medium that's been working the most, Justin?
Yeah, so I cannot say that we have one stakeholder group that's more important than the others. We love them all equally. Some of the folks that we've had to communicate the most with, though, are our current students and our employees. That's really the heart and soul of our community. So we've devoted most of our attention to communicating with them. Additional folks that we've communicated to, though, as well, are those potential students. I mean, this is a really important time when it comes to recruiting new students, and I'm certain it's this way for us. I'm certain it's this way for everybody. This is the time where we would really be lining up welcome and orientation sessions throughout the course of the summer and making sure we seal the deal as far as getting them on campus as students this fall. We've invested so much time and effort throughout the fall and the early months of the spring, getting them to apply and getting them interested in NMSU. So we've also devoted a lot of time and attention talking to potential students, talking to parents, whether they are current students' parents or potential students' parents. That's an area that we focused on. Just had a communication go out with our donors and our alumni recently from the NMSU leadership. So it really is making sure that we're keeping everybody as up to date as possible, but we have spent more time and attention to our current NMSU employees and then our current students as well.
That's great. And what have been the main mediums for communicating with those people? I know, again, it's probably across the board, but is it primarily email that you're using right now? And has that mix of channel or medium changed at all in the last few weeks compared to previously?
Yeah, so it probably will come as a shock to nobody that students don't read their email as often as we would really appreciate them to. So yes, we are communicating through email, but we're also making sure that we go above and beyond when it comes to communicating to folks. We, in credit to our web team, we stood up a COVID-19 website pretty quickly. And there we have an archive of all of our communications that we've had to all of our different stakeholders. So that way, if anybody has missed something or remembers they thought they read something, they can go back and find it pretty easily there. We also have a very good tool with frequently asked questions. You put in some keywords and it'll show you all the documents where those pop up, and we're very happy with that. But it really is integrated, all of these messages through all of our communication channels. Some of the more important ones that we saw really early on in this were social media. And whenever we made the decision that, hey, we're going to declare an early spring break and we're going to then use that early spring break period to transfer everything to an online environment, social media was in addition to all of these other things, social media really was important for us to get that message out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kate, what about you? Who are those groups you're communicating with, and what are those channels and mediums?
Well, I would echo what Justin said in terms of our groups. None is more important than the other. We are also really focused internally on our current students, our staff, and our faculty in a lot of our messaging, but we are, of course, helping our admissions teams with the messaging that go out to our prospective students and also our alumni group. We've actually seen a higher level of engagement from that particular group of folks as well. So, using email, of course, to keep all of the above connected. On the students, I will mention that we actually have a number of initiatives where our staff can volunteer, and one of them is to volunteer to call current students, particularly calling seniors and checking on them and just, talking through some of the career things that are happening with them. We know a lot of jobs are put on hold or have been pushed back to a fall start. So having the conversation, talking about our virtual celebration, encouraging them to tune in on Sunday, but really just being a point of connection on the phone that we haven't had because we too know they don't read the emails. So
yeah, that makes sense. I love that. I think that's a great idea of just being able to call and check in with those students, especially those seniors who are, getting ready to go out into the world and probably a little nervous and scared right now and not knowing what to do. Thank you for sharing your insights here. So I want to do another poll, and I want to ask everyone else in the audience, what are those channels or mediums that are working best for you? You should see that poll up now. Which ones are working best for communicating with key stakeholders? Is it email? Is it, website, internal or external? That might be for employees. It might be, external facing. Is it printed materials? It might be flyers, posters, magazines. Is it word of mouth, or is it something else? And so if it's something else, share it in the chat. We'd love to hear it. What's been working? Looks like we have some answers coming in. Social media, text for students has been big. Good. Well, let's share these results. It looks like email, website are pretty high up there, and then a lot of people using some other channels, especially social media. I think that's been a big one. Anything stand out to either of you, Justin or Kate, from some of these results here? Anything seem similar or different from what your universities are doing? Justin?
You know what, and word of mouth is actually my favorite form of marketing when it comes to promoting the university and getting new and potential students perhaps interested in New Mexico State University. But I'm very glad to see that nobody voted on that for effective communication for COVID-19, because there is a telephone game that gets involved, and one person tells one person and the message can change. So yeah, we've really, again, I think our most powerful tool right now is our website. It's there, it's available for both our internal and external audiences. So anybody who has an interest in New Mexico State University can go ahead and find that and get the necessary information.
Yeah. Kate, what about you?
I agree. I think, I saw some folks mention text in the chat, and I think that is awesome. If your university has those systems in place to do that and do that well, I applaud that. That's really cool. Where we've not been able to manage that super well given our size, and we are implementing Salesforce, so we're working through all of that, but I know that must be powerful. And we know that we've seen that work, especially on the financial aid communications using text. I think the other thing, someone else mentioned, TV and online, and that is another way that we can communicate as well. So the digital advertising and how we message that, it gets a little scary if you are tone deaf there, but it is an opportunity.
Yeah, that's good. I want to, before, there we go. I'm turning my poll off now. I think we got it. Before we move on from the channel or medium discussion, Kate, something you mentioned at the beginning is, the increase in virtual events that are happening now. So I want to talk a little bit more about that, and specifically, what role do you think that they'll continue to play? What role are they playing now, and what role do you think they'll continue to play for higher education in the future? Do you think that there'll be more virtual events going forward, and how do we best leverage those for some of the things that you typically would have done in person? How are you leveraging those right now, Kate?
Yeah, so we realized fairly early on, probably 2 weeks in, that we were going to need to stand this up and support it for the campus. So it was a pivot for campus to move to virtual. You know, there was definitely an initial just canceling or postponing of sort of everything. And then when we realized the longer term ramifications of this, we encouraged folks to start to set up, you know, Zoom and Teams and all of the different platforms that can host events. And it definitely took some training. In fact, of our Pitwire Live events that have been hosted for 3 weeks now, Zoom training is the #1 event that is still attended, but people have adapted, and there are some folks who really enjoy it. We have all sorts of events now, including student events in the evenings, from calligraphy coursework to magicians to the things that they would have done on campus for the students, they can now do, and the staff and the faculty can join if they want. We have fitness classes 4 times a day that are taught by our BFit Pitt workout instructors. And then we have, of course, our academic lectures and things like that as well. So I think that some of that will continue because we are spread on 5 campuses, and this has been a way to connect us. But more than that, it's been a way to connect people on campus who don't normally meet. We get stuck in our silos of campus buildings, and we end up in the same spots. And now we're seeing that we can talk virtually across lines. So I think there will be some people who hold on to that, and I hope that it's positive into the future.
Yeah, that's great. Appreciate that. Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of these virtual events do serve a purpose beyond this crisis. We were actually talking to our university president for about 4 or 5 months before the crisis even hit, trying to scope out what a virtual town hall meeting would be. We thought it was beneficial for him to be able to answer questions in real time from folks who maybe wanted to have an answer from the president and didn't have an opportunity to otherwise. So we had kind of sketched out what that might look like, and he was receptive to it, and we just hadn't had an opportunity to make it happen. And then all of a sudden, the crisis struck, and so he's had a virtual town hall every Thursday afternoon. This will be the 6th week in a row later this afternoon that he'll have those. And honestly, I think he really enjoys it. He's getting more and more comfortable there, and it's almost like watching his own TV show as I'm sitting there tuning in, watching. He's very comfortable taking the questions. He's very personable, and I do think it's an opportunity for leaders to go ahead and show that they are actual human beings that people can really get a good conversation going with. And it shows that your leaders are responsive. And I just think that these kinds of things are beneficial to everybody involved.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think that especially right now where we're all remote, that human connection and seeing someone that is, especially in leadership, is, you know, a real human being can be really important. I know some of our leadership at our company, they've actually been doing short videos of them at home, like with their kids and some of the things they're doing. And I think that's gone a long way to, you know, continue to have some of those tight ties within the team and help people feel still a part of the team, which is so important. Justin, we had a question come in through chat from Brooke, who asked, are those town hall meetings that you mentioned, are they public or are they just for internal audiences?
So yeah, they are public. They are done via Zoom. We also, there's another service that we put them out through as well, another video hosting service. So there's 2 options to view those. We solicit questions throughout the course of the week so that those can come in ahead of time and during the actual event. And was there one other question that I didn't answer?
I think that was it. Yeah. Was it just public facing or internal?
Yeah, and they are public facing, so they're not, most of the questions do come in from NMSU students and NMSU faculty and staff, but everybody is welcome to those. We widely publicize those, and we actually had to increase our Zoom license. We had started with one level of Zoom for the webinar that maybe capped it at, and I forget the levels, but essentially we had to go all the way up to the 5,000 level for the Zoom conferencing, and they've been wildly popular.
That's great. And how are you collecting some of those questions that come in that are addressed?
Sure. There is a static email address that we stood up for this, and I forget what the actual email address is. It's President Questions or something to that effect. And that's advertised throughout the course of the week. And then during the town hall, it's also pops up as a slide occasionally for folks to go ahead and send their questions in.
That's excellent. Cool. Well, I want to switch directions just a little bit. I really appreciate the insights that you both shared, but I want to talk a little bit more about, you know, the tone. That I think, Kate, you mentioned at the beginning, the tone is really important. and what is it that we are communicating? What's that big thing that you're trying to communicate out to stakeholders across all different channels? I've noticed some organizations have focused on taking really a more empathetic tone with their communications right now. We're in this together type message, and others have focused just on communicating like the facts. This is what we're doing, and this is what people need to know. And I think that, of course, it depends on who the stakeholder is and how you're communicating, but what are the discussions at each of your universities about that tone and that main message that needs to be shared out? Kate, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I think we've seen this shift over the past several weeks. Definitely at the start of the pandemic, it was facts driven, right? So emails, things that were going out, our website information was all really just the facts about what was happening on campus and what we were doing. But we have seen that shift now that we've seen a little bit more space, and we're moving into the empathetic space, I would say, but we're really careful about, it's certainly leadership carrying the right tone. It's also which member of leadership, so it doesn't all fall on our chancellor all the time, but our provost does a weekly email on Fridays, and she brings a lot of that, sort of feeling into her messaging every week. And then we have other leadership who chime in occasionally as well. So I think tone is also about what you don't say as much as it is about what you do say. So just watching, really having multiple sets of eyes on language and on remarks and things that are planned, so that we're not tone deaf to some of the issues that people are having.
Yeah, that's great. Justin, what about you?
Sure, and I am receptive to a lot of the we're all in this together. I think that's probably one of the themes that I've seen most, not just across higher education, but across the entire country, with every brand out there is trying to say, hey, we're working together. We're going to get through this together. One area that we've tried to focus on, though, at New Mexico State University is, with an uncertain future, the mission of NMSU is actually more important now than it's ever been. We're a land-grant university, so our focus is education plus research plus community outreach. And those really are essential in our entire country getting through all of this, is to focus on those areas. So we've really tried to lean into that and say, hey, we've been doing this for more than 100 years. We intend on being around for a lot longer than that going forward. And it's because of our mission to serve the people of New Mexico that we've never been more relevant.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I think that is, super important. And when you have a good mission and vision, I think, defined for your brand, it's in instances like this, it's great to go back to that and know how that connects with some of the reality of what's happening in, who you're serving in their worlds. So I want to ask a little bit more about how are you organizing all of these things, right? We talked about, the tone. We talked about, different mediums or channels. How are you ensuring that consistency, ensuring that everyone is on the same page on the marketing team, but also anyone else across campus? I mean, some examples or ideas. Do you have a crisis communication plan set up, or a website? Are you doing regular syncs with teams to make sure that they're all on the same page about how do we be consistent going forward with all the things that we're creating? So what have you done, and what has worked the best to ensure that consistency? Kate?
So we have an emergency operations center at the university that was set up. It's part of our larger crisis communications plan, really our larger university plan, that there's the center that includes key people from across the university: facilities, public health, safety, and communications. And since March 9th, I think, is the first day that we had that fully staffed with 2 of our communications folks. So every message that is going out related to COVID-19, no matter who it is from or who it is going to, has to be cleared through that office. So that is how we are keeping everything aligned. And the 2 staff there are amazing, and they're checking to see, that the language is consistent, that we haven't already said something in a different way. They're offering advice to folks like, this message went out, you could try this, or, so having those 2 staff tied very closely to sort of the center of the universe around this has been key for us.
That's great. Justin, what about you?
Yeah, and I think keeping everybody on the same page is difficult, even in the best of times. Everybody kind of has their own idea of what they want to say and how best to say it. And I think we're fortunate with this current situation that everybody has understood the gravity of it, and they understand the benefit of making sure there's a coordinated approach when communicating to everybody. So yeah, much like Kate was talking about, we on our end, we have a central location. I have to see every single piece of communication that goes out. And like I said, folks understand the gravity of the situation and the need for this. So we haven't really seen any issues with folks going rogue or saying, oh my goodness, I didn't even know this person was talking to this person over here through this form of communication. We've really been fortunate that it's really been centralized during this time.
That's great. I want to mention just, for a moment, we have a couple of resources just through research that we've done that we want to share out. We can share it out now in chat. V or Tyson, and if you're on, you want to share some of these out. There's one from the EAB, which is an organization that many of you might be familiar with, but they have a full library of support materials for how to manage coronavirus crisis across campus. Our team as well at Lucid Press, we do templates, right? So we've put together actually a lot of coronavirus templates and some around, a crisis communication plan. And it sounds like a lot of universities have those in place. I just encourage anyone who doesn't to look at some of those resources that are out there and use them if you need them to help maintain that consistency and make sure that you have that plan that can be shared with everyone out there. I want to shift gears just a little bit. We have just a few minutes left, and we will do some Q&A. But I want to talk about what role do you believe brand has in crisis communications, kind of like we're in right now, and what role should it have? Kate?
So I love talking brand. This is really at the heart of what I love to do. And having launched the university's master brand last year, the good news for us is that this is fresh in everyone's mind. We were very insistent that the community was included in our entire process. So by the end of all of our research, we had more than 7,000 people have a voice. So for us to keep brand at the forefront is easier now because so many people were involved. And so it is just a matter of helping people remember to swing back to that, because the reality is that our brand is rooted in truth. And it is this idea of reinvention, and people they already do believe in it, and they can bring that to their messaging, sort of no matter what message is going out. It helps unite us. So it's been really important for us, even though I've had to push reminders out to folks and sometimes see things come across and, hey, you could look at this through this lens, and it makes it even more accurate to reflect who we are.
Wonderful. Justin, what about you?
Yeah, so I look at crisis communication, or a crisis, as anything that threatens the reputation of your brand. And so anything that kind of rises to that level, I bunch into the crisis communication response. So that's why it's so important to make sure that you're building a strong brand before a crisis. And so that way you can lean on that. It can become an asset to you during the crisis and kind of help buoy you through until things calm down again. So yeah, these are very much intertwined. The importance of brand, the importance of a strong brand, the importance of building that with your stakeholders before a crisis, and then using that as a tool to get through it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, when it comes to brand, a lot of what that should be about is trust, right? Building trust with people. If you're familiar with Edelman, they're one of the, they put out some research every year on brand trust across all organizations, and they monitor that. And they actually came out with a new study. It looks like V just shared it out in the chat for anyone interested, about the impacts of brand trust during COVID-19. And I think that that's really interesting and important to think about. I think you're absolutely right, Justin, that it starts long before you're in a crisis, that you're building that trust with people, but it's especially important that they trust you in the moment, so that as you're sending materials and communication out to them, that they know that they can rely on you and they can trust you, and by doing that, it reinforces that, right? Yeah. I want to just in our last minute or two, I want to just take one of these questions that we have about how has the, working process for your teams changed? Many teams are now working remotely. Justin, I know you talked about that briefly at the beginning. Kate, I know you talked about you have kind of that crisis center set up, but what's that process been like, and what have the changes been that have been helpful the last few weeks for each of your universities? Justin, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think like everybody, we are now intimately familiar with Zoom. We're on multiple Zoom calls every single day, and then it's usually alternating between a Zoom call and a GoToMeeting call and a Microsoft Teams call. The Microsoft Teams in particular, we got that going pretty early on to make sure that we can keep track of projects and everybody can go ahead and talk to each other. And actually, we were using that before the whole crisis began, but it really became more important during this. And I do think that this is something that's going to outlive this crisis. There's probably folks on my team who, even after this is all said and done, won't come into work any longer. They will work from their homes, and this will be the new normal for them. And I think that maybe a lot of folks across the country had one way of thinking about this before this crisis, that we need to see somebody in the office to make sure that they're doing the job that we've asked them to do. And I think those who are capable of doing it have proven to their superiors that, yeah, actually I can do my job from my house, and maybe even more effectively than I could before.
Yeah, excellent. Kate, what about you?
Yes, I would agree with what Justin said. I think that there are definitely members of the team who, working remotely, has possibly even improved the work that they're doing. On our team of 60, we are geographically separated. We have 3 spaces across campus. So there were some team members we didn't see on a regular basis anyway. I will say that Teams is something we did not launch until we were forced into it once we were working from home, but that has been really helpful. The chat functionality of Teams has allowed us to band together and feel. In fact, yesterday we had an all-staff meeting, and some people in our chat from that commented that they talk to folks more now than they did when they were buildings apart. So I think that has been helpful. I think that will last. But I will say, and I saw this in the chat earlier, that it is hard to get the work done between all the calls. And, we're going to have to figure out how to carve out time for that. Someone mentioned, actually shutting off Teams and all the notifications at some point. Everyone agrees. Basically, it's like shutting your door at work. We haven't done that yet, but I'm going to steal that idea because it's a great one.
I actually think that was Tyson on our team. So we feel the same pain. And our team actually set up, 2 mornings a week where we are no meetings, no meeting mornings. So we have our calendars blocked out. So it's just kind of work time. But yeah, I think that's a challenge. I think it's good to hear that, both of your teams have transitioned pretty well, and most people are working from home pretty well. I know that some of the challenges, though, are just the increase in meetings. Sometimes people can get stuck in silos a little bit or face kind of process bottlenecks. Has there been anything outside of, those resources that you mentioned that has really helped those few people maybe across the team who've struggled a little bit or who've needed that in-person interaction? Is there anything else that has really you found to help those people navigate those changes of working remotely?
I may be the person who's struggling the most with working remotely. I desperately need human interaction, and as much as it's something to look on my screen and see a photo of somebody, I really do work better whenever I'm in the same room as somebody and we can go ahead and work collaboratively on a project. So I'm very much looking forward to that coming back. But I do think I think a good strategy and something that we've done within our unit is to ensure we have regular check-ins, make sure we're calling folks on a regular basis. And if I look up and say, oh my goodness, I haven't spoken to so-and-so in a few days, just to go ahead and give them a phone call and make sure that, we're keeping those lines of communication going, because it is difficult for folks staying inside their homes and not having that regular interaction. There's going back to that psychological thing, that's probably one of the bigger things that's going to come out of this is that is the ramifications of not interacting with other people regularly.
Yeah, I think you're right. Kate, what about you?
Well, I think we are taking some cues from what we're learning. And for those of you who are homeschooling kids at home, seeing some of the tools that teachers are using. My kids at home did a show and share. So the teacher set up basically a PowerPoint or a Google Slide doc, and they had to share something from home and write about it. And we actually did that at a staff meeting where we shared, something about the home environment we were working in, or our pets. Having bring your dog to work day has been hugely popular, right? So finding some of the more personal opportunities to connect has been really helpful for us.
Yeah, I love that. Kate and I were talking right before this webinar started. One thing that our teams tried to do is, you can see Justin and I both have our virtual backgrounds in Zoom right now. And, our team internally has had kind of a theme of the day for your Zoom background, right? So maybe it's just something personal, your favorite movie as a kid or something else. I think finding some of those ways to just have a personal connection like that is key. So, I know we're close to time here. Really appreciate all the insights that both of you have shared today. I think this has been super valuable just to have this discussion and come together, as higher education marketers and talk about what's going on. So we really appreciate you taking the time today. And I think just to end, I want to end just kind of on a high note here, and then we'll turn it over to some Q&A from everyone in the audience. But last question I have for both of you is, what's one positive side effect you believe is going to come about, brought on by some of this crisis, some of the changes that have happened? So after we get back to normal, we've talked about some of those things already. Maybe it's that, organizations are more comfortable with letting people work remote. Maybe it's just you've had more time to spend with family, even though that can be crazy when you're homeschooling, right, Kate? Maybe it's just a simplification of working processes, or a focus more on that core brand or brand story. So, what would you say is a positive side effect you feel like has come about that you hope will continue? Justin?
Sure. From our side of things, I think it's the realization of what's actually possible if we put our minds to it. The metaphor, or it's not a metaphor, but the example we use is if you had asked us in January how long it would take us to move 100% of our courses to an online environment, we would have said, hey, that's going to take years. It's going to take all these resources. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of March, we had to do it in 2 weeks. And then we pulled it off. And it wasn't easy. And there were still some hiccups and still some things that we had to adjust. But we understood that maybe we don't have to hold on to some of these old things that we thought were the truth about how long it takes to do something, and what potential catastrophes lie around the corner if we don't execute it just perfectly. So maybe there's a lot of other things that we could maybe achieve as a higher education institution if we just try it.
I love that. And I think especially applicable for, higher education that has a bigger mission and purpose than, for-profit organizations even. And so I love that idea. Kate, what about you?
I think in the same vein, higher ed typically moves slower than industry or corporate marketing. And we have been forced into a position to move more quickly, and we did it. And so we're starting to pivot to digital on a lot of things. In fact, the call before this one was with my team. We are ramping up our digital screen templates in LucidPress. So even though we typically have used LucidPress for print, we are turning towards how do we use that in digital ways. And I think we're looking at that across the board now, because it's really changed what has for so long been a focus on print to being digital.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I love to hear that. Thank you. I want to turn it over just for the last few minutes to some questions that we have from those listening in. So if you have questions for our panelists, Kate, Justin, today, feel free to drop those in chat or in our Q&A box, and we're going to make sure that we can take a few minutes to answer some of those. It looks like, I'll just start, I'll start going here and asking some of them that I see, and we'll see how long we get. But what are you doing to address students who don't have laptops or internet access? That was a question from Kim. Justin, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, that was actually, New Mexico is a very large state and a very rural federal state. So there's a lot of space between human beings in New Mexico. And not just that, but not everybody, all of our students have access to computers. And I don't want to say this too loud, but we essentially started stripping down our computer labs and checking out that equipment to students and making sure everybody had a device that they needed, especially when we saw online webcams. You couldn't even buy a webcam if you needed it. So we went ahead and used the resources we had in front of us. We've also done some creative engineering and boosted the wireless signal for our buildings and made our parking lots Wi-Fi accessible. We have, because we're a land grant, we have buildings around the state, and we did the same thing with each of those. So we advertise those. Hey, come park in front of our building, hop on our wireless signal. We also, a lot of the Comcast and some of the other larger cable companies have been doing some free internet for folks too, and we've made sure that those resources are communicated to folks.
Love those ideas. I think that's great. Kate, what about you?
Yes, we have pooled our resources as well. We have a campaign for a student emergency relief fund, and emergency means a lot of things, but one of those is technology and making sure our students can stay connected and finish out the semester strong. So we've been getting gracious help from our business partners as well as our alumni to get the resources out to the students who need it. I will say we've also done this for our community-based organizations. We're in a very urban setting, and making sure that in Pittsburgh public schools, for example, and other schools who need it for K-12 education, we're trying to do the same.
Love that. Another question we had here from Grant is, how are you preparing for post-COVID-19? Will campus communications and marketing change drastically once everything's back to normal? Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, so that's actually the discussion we've been having a lot over the last week, and our president's going to talk more about that in his town hall later today. The virus is in charge, and we'll adapt to what the virus is doing, but we're putting together a plan for coming back in full force this fall. Whatever that case may be, full force may not even be the right wording there. It may be smaller classes. It may be folks working on certain days and alternating that. But we feel that we've invested a lot, and we have a very beautiful campus, and it might be an opportunity for us to go ahead and see what it's going to take for us to get back there. One of the areas that's probably going to open up first for us is our research operation. We've got laboratories where they're supposed to be sanitary in the first place. There's always personal protective equipment used in those laboratories, and it's not like a lot of people are in those laboratories at any given time. So those actually might be a pretty safe place for people to be in the first place. So that's probably going to be one of the first areas to open up for us.
Excellent. Kate, what about you?
I think from a marketing communication standpoint, we're really, I mentioned earlier, that shift from print to digital. I think work will look different. I think we don't know yet. We've just started to discuss reentry, and it's really driven by the state of Pennsylvania and decisions that are made far above ours. But we are already thinking that it's not going to look the same. We're going to have a new normal, and we're going to be focused on where our audience is, even more focused than we have been in the past.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Well, I think we have time for one more question. And the last question we have here from Ryan is, from a marketing standpoint, what are you doing to combat potentially disheartened digital learners or students? And I think that probably ties into some of the existing students you have, and maybe when it comes to, recruiting new students, and, what are you doing if there's going to be an increase in, digital learning going forward? How you position that and message that so that you can help those people who might be disheartened by that. Justin?
Yeah, that's actually some feedback that we've gotten from students who really did want a face-to-face classroom setting for their college experience and weren't able to get that over the last few months. So I think more than ever, it's talking to those folks, it's hearing what they have to say and letting them know that we are doing everything we can to make whatever the case may be. If people have moved to an online environment and really like it and want to stay there, make sure that's available to them. If they want to go ahead and go back to a face-to-face environment, make sure that's available to them as well. It's being responsive to our customers.
That's great. Kate, what about you?
So that's one of the main reasons we stood up Pitwire Live, which has become a place where they can go and find, how to connect and engage, really get plugged in with Panther Nation at the university, because we knew that there were some folks feeling isolated and weren't really thriving in this environment. So that has been very helpful, providing opportunities outside of what they are doing online in their classroom, so to speak. And then also setting up a number of social groups that we are trying to promote. So places they can go on Yammer, or Pitt Commons is one where we connect alumni with students on a platform. So it's trying to set up those other places they can go, and continuing to send out, empathetic messages, back to the we're all in this together.
Love that. Well, you know what, I think we're about out of time, but Kate, Justin, really, again, appreciate you both taking the time today to spend some time with us and to share your thoughts and your insights. I want to encourage everyone else who's listening, if we didn't get to any of your questions, feel free to share those with us. You can reach out to us afterwards. You can reach out directly to me. My email is Garrett@LucidPress. I'd love to hear from you. And again, I hope that this has been valuable. We wanted to just start a discussion, a conversation, and we appreciate all of your participation. And I think that there's a lot of really great stuff going on, a lot of really great stuff that I heard. And despite the challenges that we faced, I think that we're all going to get through this together. And I think that the key thing is, helping and relying on each other. And so again, I want to just thank you, Kate. Thank you, Justin, for your time today. Last thing I would mention is we will share out some of the materials and links afterwards via email. And if anyone's interested in how Lucid Press might be able to help with ensuring consistency across your communications that are going out, we'd love to chat with you more about that. We found that to actually be especially helpful for lots of organizations right now who are facing a lot of the same challenges. So again, thank you for joining us today. Kate, Justin, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.